What's up? How you doing? Here we are late in the night. It's so late. It's not even today anymore. It's tomorrow. So it's after midnight, and I'm out here having a tropical beverage, Hawaiian. It's got all these tropical fruits in here. Tastes really good, like you're in Hawaii. So I was thinking in my mind. In the fifth grade, we had a teacher who loved doing book reports. Not only did you have to do a book report, but once you wrote it out, you had to stand in front of the class on the left side and read it. And he would always say, "Don't tell what the ending is," as if somebody was going to be so fascinated with my book review, and then they would go and buy the book and read it for themselves just to find out what the ending was. Nobody did that. So, man, and I used to hate getting up there and, felt like forever. Get up there and talk and everybody's watching you. And so anyway, there was a kid in my class, his name was Chris. He loved Matt Christopher books. Every book review, or not review, every book report he did was a book on sports written by Matt Christopher. And he was lucky that Matt Christopher wrote a lot of books, but he loved Matt Christopher. I was never into the, sports books. I remember one time, a friend of mine, he knew that I could pitch pretty good. I was able to throw a fastball and pretty accurate. And he said to me, "Why don't you join Little League?" This was when I was little. And I said, "I don't know. It seems like a hassle, going to the games." And I wouldn't tell my parents either, so they wouldn't be in the audience because I wasn't that type of guy. I kind of did things on my own. I didn't include my family because unnecessary. They could come to other things, but those kind of things, it could just be me and my friends. So one day I spent the entire day with him and his father. It was a Saturday. And his father drove us around. We went to stores. We went to Sears that day. And then finally, in the afternoon, we ended up at the field, which was near my house. And they were trying out for Little League Baseball. And then I thought about it for a few minutes, and I said, not really interested in joining a team. So I said, "All right, I'm going home." And I jumped over the fence, which was right by the railroad tracks, and I hung around the railroad tracks for a little bit exploring because that was my thing. And then I went home, and I did not join the Little League Baseball team. And then a few years later, when I was in the 7th grade, the kids in my neighborhood were playing stickball or baseball, whatever, and they wanted me to pitch. And I was pitching, and a kid comes up to me and he's like, "You should join a team or something." And I said I should, but I'm not going to. So that never happened. Delicious. Yeah, I remember in the 8th grade, we had a, I don't know what it was, it was like some kind of performance thing we had to do in the gymnasium. And my teacher told everybody in the classroom, they gave us a note to bring to our parents, and it was basically we were supposed to dress up like our parents' occupation, and then come back to the school or be at the school, and then our parents would come and we would do some kind of singing in the back dressed up as our parents' occupation. So everybody told their parents except for me, and I lived far away from the school back then, so I got on the train, I got on the bus, I ended up home. My father wasn't home yet because my father would get home at like 6 o'clock, so I got home before my father. My mother was upstairs. I didn't open up the light in the basement because it would trigger a light upstairs. And I went in the basement and I grabbed my father's occupation outfit. And then I left the house. Nobody knew I arrived. I left the house. I reversed everything. I took the bus. I took the train. Then I went to my school again, which took me a long time. And I remember running up the hill. And when I got up there, I was all sweaty. I got all sweaty from running up the hill, and get in the gymnasium, and it's full of parents. They're all dressed up in their suits. A lot of them are lawyers, doctors, things like that. And I went up on stage where the rest of my class was, and I sat there until the show was done. And then once the show was done, everybody went down, got greeted by their parents, got a little baby hug, pat on the back, and I kind of slid out the side door and went back home. To this day, nobody knows that ever happened. So, yeah, and I didn't hang around for anybody to ask me, hey, where's your parents? I would have been like, they're over there, they're working the crowd. So then I went home, and yeah. But I do remember, that was 8th grade. I remember in 8th grade, I decided, and I wasn't really a party guy, but I decided that any kid that gave me an invitation to go to their party for the end of the year, I would go. And so I got a bunch of invitations, and I went to every single party they had. Parties for kids. It wasn't like, like adults. And I've said this story before, but every party I went to, all the parents would come at the end, a few hours later, and they would pick up their children and take them home. Except for me, because nobody knew I was there. I would leave the house, and then I'd walk to the train station, and then the bus, and then I'd get home. Well, one particular time, this girl, Kathleen, invited me to her house. And I decided, I saw everybody leaving. I was there for 3 hours or so, and then parents were coming up and picking up their kids. And I go, probably it's a good time for me to leave now, because if I'm left, to the end, they're going to notice that I'm leaving with nobody picking me up, and they may say something. So I remember kind of waited to the end, a lot of kids left at once. I was kind of like the last one. And I go, okay, I'm gonna say bye now. So I turn around and I said, I'm leaving. And I started to go for the door. And the mother of Kathleen, she goes, where do you think you're going? And I said, I'm going home. Where do you think I'm going? And she goes, who's here to pick you up? And I go, well, nobody's here to pick me up. I'm taking the transportation, public transportation. And she looks at me, she goes, oh no, you're not doing that. And she looks over at her daughter, Kathleen. She goes, Kathleen, grab your jacket, we're taking him home. So I said, that's unnecessary. I can do it. She goes, no. So they had this big Cadillac. It was new back then, but it was big. And I got in the back, and we took off, and the windows were down. It was a nice spring day, really nice out, nice mild night, evening. And Kathleen reached over, David Bowie, Let's Dance was playing, and she cranked it up, put like a 10. And I was thinking, wait a minute, in my house, in my father's car, first of all, you couldn't touch the radio unless you were turning it down. And my father never allowed the radio to go above a 3, unless he was listening to Billy Joel, Moving Out. Go home to your mom there. Unless he was listening to Billy Joel, Moving Out, and then he would crank it up to like a 7, 8. He loved that song, Moving Out. So anyway, I was listening to this thing blaring, Let's Dance by David Bowie, which I'm a big fan of the song. But now every time I hear it, I think of that night that I got a ride home from that overly protective mother. So, yeah. And then my thing is like, where do I tell him to drop me off? I didn't want him to drop me off my house. I don't know. I was really suspecting people were up to no good, so I didn't want him to know where I lived. So I made her drop me off a block away. And then I walked back. Funny story though, when I was working at another place, I was a busboy. And I was there for a while, and then one night, I don't know why, but I was walking home. So walking up, walking, and then all of a sudden a little station wagon pulls over, and there was a kid who worked with me, and he got off, but his father came to pick him up. And I guess the kid said, you know, I know him, and his father said, oh, give him a ride. Nice father, really nice. Nice kid, too. Kid was my age, but he was still a kid. And pulled over and asked me if I wanted a ride, and I kind of, you know, I said, I'm okay. And the father said, I'll give you a ride. So I got in the back, and then all the way, I was thinking, where should I tell him to drop me off? Where should I tell him to drop me off? I didn't want him to see, you know, my exact house, because I don't know who he is. You know, it could be a serial killer, you don't know. So I made him drop me off a block away, on the right-hand side, away from my house. And again, I thank him. I say, thank you very much. Close the door, and he's not leaving. He's waiting for me to go in the house. So I'm like, this is ridiculous. I want to tell him, you know, go. So he's waiting, make sure I'm okay. He's doing it out of concern, and I'm thinking, okay, this is not really my house. And if somebody's watching me from this house, they're going to come out and say, hey, what are you doing in my yard? So what I did is I went down the driveway, which was even more, you know, it was more difficult for me to do that because it was a long driveway, and I had to pass by a bunch of windows. And I was thinking, what if the guy's going to look out the curtain now and look at me and say, who's that guy in our driveway? And then run out with a bat. So I went all the way, and I could see he was still waiting there because I could still see the lights. And then finally, when I went way in the back, which now I'm trespassing big time, then finally I can hear him, you know, hit the gas and leave. And then the second he went down about a block, I took off and went to my house. Very good. But yeah, so that's what happened. Started off talking about Matt Christopher, but it ended up going elsewhere. But yeah, Matt Christopher was a big author for this kid Chris in my class. And I'll say something about Chris. He always had a bunch of cash, bunch of money in his pocket, always. And I mean good money. I don't mean he had like $4 or $5. I mean he had a couple of hundred or so back then. You know, it was all 20s, and he used to say, hey, let's go and you know, get some soup. So we would go to a soup kitchen, a little restaurant that had a big counter, and this was in the winter. So we'd go in there, and it would just be me and him and about 15 old guys, like, you know, in their mid-70s and up, and they would be eating their soup with their nice wool jackets and coats on. And me and my friend, you know, we were the only kids in there that were about 11 years old. And we'd order soup, and we start eating it. And he would pay, pull out the money, and boom, you know, and I don't know, first time I met a kid that young that had that kind of money. So then we had a friend, you know, not a friend, but we knew somebody who was a jeweler in that area in my hometown there, and we'd make a pit stop. It was almost like Leave It to Beaver. We'd make a pit stop. He knew us, and his breath had the fragrance of heavy duty coffee. This is a guy that his breath was like his stomach was made from coffee beans. He'd breathe out, it was a rich, it would surround you and stick to your face, the fragrance of coffee. So we'd go in there and we'd talk to him for a little bit, get a little bit of caffeine in our system, and then we'd leave. But my friend always had cash. So one day he says, I bet you're wondering how come I always have that much money on me. And I'm thinking, well, thought did pass through my mind. And he goes, I take care of horses. And I'm thinking, we live in the city. Where do you find these horses? So, I mean, the only place back then that had horses was the police department. And why would they let an 11-year-old take care of horses and pay him so much money? I mean, he always had money. I'm talking about a good amount. $200, $300 in his pocket. You know, maybe today that doesn't sound like a lot. But when I was 11, that was a lot of money. And especially if you were 11, that was a good amount of money. So, I don't know. Still a mystery. And he lived in the crappiest part of town. Like, really crappy. And yet, he had a lot of money. So, yeah, now when I see a book by Matt Christopher, automatically I think of him. Nice night, though. See, Jupiter's way up there. Anyway, it's after midnight, so it's really Friday, and Halloween is coming soon. Very excited about that. All the wackos come out. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.